we seem to move away from that. I don't know how else to say this other than it feels like a very cruel and mean moment. There is a real pulling away of support for food insecurity as we see the populations who are becoming food insecure increase. And some people have said to me, gee, it feels sort of like during COVID, right, with this big increase. And yet, during COVID, we had this, first of all, not man-made increase in terms of need, but we also had the state, federal, and local governments like right there with us. So as you had this increase in need, right there you had that same curve in terms of government stepping in to relieve the pressure. And now you have the curves going in opposite directions, where you have increased need, not for any good reason, and a pulling away of support at the same time.
Senator, I know you have some numbers for us. I just want to set the stage a little bit in New Jersey, where 1 in 10 New Jersey households now struggle with food access, which is, I suppose, a lower in food insecurity statistic than in much of the United States, which is 13 to 16%, I think, nationally. But there was a 22% food insecurity surge in 2024 in New Jersey. What do you do, and what's your sense of why we're in this boat?
Well, Jim, I have nothing to say anymore based upon you going into those statistics, but in sincerity, number one, we have a Peabody Award winner here. I got a Medal of Good Conduct in the Boy Scouts, so I feel really honored to be here. And I've said this about Ann before. I only wish I was more religious, and I say that on the bema here, but I believe in God when I see them speak through people's actions, and Ann, that's you. So, and I couldn't mean that more sincerely. And all of you for being here, and I'm sure in your own ways in your lives how charitable you are. So look, at the bottom line, we could talk all the statistics we want. What does the number 800,000 mean? You want to talk about being angry? There's 800,000 people in our state of 9 million that are food secure. And even sadder than that is, of those 800,000, 262,000 are children. Really is just something. And sometimes you go back to the future. The food stamps that Ann mentioned, which was the predecessor to the SNAP program and that fancy acronym, that comes out of somebody we think of maybe with the Vietnam War, Lyndon Baines Johnson, but I like to think of him more relative to shepherding through the Voting Rights Act and the war on poverty. To wit, food stamps was an important part of that. And in 1964, and I paraphrase, but he said something like, this is instinctual as it relates to all of our spirits of giving for a country of such abundance. This is the least that we could do to make certain that we help others, live a better life. And that's what it was supposed to be about.
But if I hear Ann correctly, there is a marked decrease in federal support for food insecurity, and that leaves the state to pick up to fill the hole. So what can you tell me about sort of the state of New Jersey's efforts? What do you see in the Senate? What kinds of programs are there? What are we going to do to approach this 800,000 food insecure New Jerseyans?
Well, sure. We have a lot of different deficits that have come through the big. We have a lot of different deficits that have come through the big, beautiful bill, as it relates to Medicare, as it relates to Medicaid, and with those indicating that if we do anything to pick up the gaps, even if we wanted to, then we're going to be fined and we're going to lose more money. At least with the money we're going to lose from SNAP, we haven't been told that we can't fill the gaps. What will the gaps be? Again, numbers. We get $2 billion a year, or we did, from the federal government to promulgate the SNAP program. What we will lose isn't certain, but it's not, and the losses have to do with the different eligibility that's been changed. That's what they've done. So you always, if you're an able-bodied person between age 55 and 18 to 55, you would do 80 hours a month if you were able-bodied in a training program to try to put yourself in a position maybe potentially to get employed. which is fine. They changed those rules to now say from 18 to 65. So they added another 10 years. The other things they did was when you were in a household where you had a child that was up to 17, well, that child would get those benefits too if you were eligible. Now they said only till age 14. So now there's a gap of those 3 years. Yeah, yeah. If you're an 18-year-old out on your own, you used to be able to get the SNAP benefit, again, if you were making less than $15,000 a year or unemployed, until you were 24. Done. Now it's just, it cuts off at 18. If you were a veteran, if you were unhoused, you would get these benefits, no more. So we're talking about a big segment of the population that would get the benefits. How that's going to translate out of that $2 billion, we're not sure yet.
All right, just so I understand things, what the expectation would have been prior to January 2025 was $2 billion or so in SNAP. Any idea what you are dealing with? Is there estimates? Is it going to be less than $2 billion now? And if so, how much?
Well, I don't have the numbers in terms of what we think the impact is going to be, but we're seeing staged rollout of this. You're going to start seeing the first. One of the things happening with SNAP is you have this sort of 3 months free thing going on, where the first 3 months that you apply, you are eligible, and then you're discontinued if you're not working, volunteering 80 hours a month, under all these scenarios.
Wait, so as we sit here tonight in the middle of March,
Yes.
we don't even know how bad it's going to be, and the worst
No.
hasn't come yet.
Right. We know that there's between 1 and 300 million in new cost sharing coming our way. We know that counties are going to have to pick up another 25% of the admin costs, which the federal government has always picked up. We know that some of the actual SNAP benefits themselves are going to move to the state. So there's a lot of cost sharing moving down to the states. At the same time, we're pushing people off the rolls. We are not doing anything to make sure there is an ability for people who are working to actually support their family fully. So most people who are receiving SNAP benefits are also working, right? They're not home watching TV, right? So, there's a living wage issue, there's housing costs, there's medical costs. These all come together, and the basket under these is food, right? Food is sort of the place where all of these issues get caught. So while you have high housing costs and you have high medical costs, you have access issues to both those things, transportation, childcare, all of these things hit the same populations. It just kind of snowballs on them. And instability in any one of those hits the food space.
Have either one of you, most policy, when we analyze policy, even if it's not popular, if it's not something you agree with, at least there's some sort of intellectual, you can understand what somebody is trying to do as they advocate for a particular policy line. How do you sell this? Who's advantaged? Who scores political points by kneecapping the food insecure?
Do you want me to take this one?
Please.
Okay, so here's what was the predicate with this, is that this is taking care of all the fraud, the waste, and the abuse. And truth be told, is that the nonpartisan congressional record, if you will, and the research branch said that any kind of fraud or abuse in the area of the SNAP program was absolutely rare, and it would just be limited to administrative mistakes. So this is the old, most people are lazy, and people that don't deserve it are getting it, and so we're going to cut it. Do you realize over the next 8 years, nationwide, they're going to cut $186 billion from SNAP benefits for the entire country? That's the largest single percentage reduction of any program ever for food.
You know, one of the things, whenever you are lucky enough to talk to Ann about this, and I assume, Senator, you know, you've come armed with some numbers, it's all very, very helpful. But sometimes we forget the human face of what we're talking about. And Ann, every time you've explained this to me, it just rips me, because we all have images of who might be food insecure. And you always say, you sort of very gently wag your finger and say, it's not who you think. It's a much broader segment. It may be your neighbor. Can you just share with me a little bit of what everyone needs to know, so that this isn't some sort of analytic exercise of trying to understand numbers? Can you tell me about understanding faces?
Sure. The food insecure are really our neighbors, and we live in these beautiful suburbs that are socioeconomically diverse, and we don't realize how much food insecurity we encounter every day. So seniors living on a fixed income, trying to hold on to their housing, right? Food is one area, becomes very difficult. Bus drivers, the guy who puts gas in your car, the guy who brings you your Uber Eats dinner, right? Amazon delivery people, people who take care of aging parents. These are all people who come to our pantry. They come with their young children, they come with their aging parents, and all they're trying to do is put food on the table. So these truly are our neighbors. We don't live in any community that does not encounter food security every day, throughout the day. We just don't realize what we're seeing.
Senator, do you have anything to add to
I
that?
hear it, I just, I keep playing these numbers in my mind, but like 800,000, and there's just about 9 million people here. So if you break it all down, just look at this room, that would mean there's 3 or 4 of us that are in this room that are food insecure. So it's 1 in 9 people.
Can you take us to Trenton, please, and tell us a little bit about the awareness of this problem, sort of the recognition. We talked a little bit at the top about the competition. There's a gazillion things that obviously the state needs to take care of. But give me a sense, when you want to talk about this issue, are your colleagues listening and getting it?
Yeah, no, there's no question. And,
Democrats, Republicans, everybody.
and I was about to say that, you read my mind. This is nonpartisan, certainly on the state level. The rhetoric, I think, that happens in Washington is a lot worse than it is here, truth be told. I respect my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and their people go hungry too. You know, it's not like, oh, it's only the Democrats. Now, not that Democrats are all minorities, but truth be told, as the percentages are even higher in minority communities as it relates to food insecurity. But at the end of the day, we all think about it. We've got a lot to think about now. We've got, I mentioned Medicaid and Medicare before, basic health care that we're gonna have people without. So there's a lot going on, and you know, when we're not fighting for the funds to keep the construction going so that tunnel could be built, you know, through the Gateway project, we're fighting over just basic support for food and for, you know, for health care. And for the people that government's supposed to be about, in my mind, those who need us most.
So let's talk a little bit about what can be done. I don't mean, obviously, you know, there's that we control process, not outcome. So we're obviously not going to sit here and affect anything in Washington. But there are things all of us can do to address this gaping hole and need. We were talking about a few of those the other day. And let me ask you to start. What can I do?
So I think food insecurity is the one area, I know we've been sort of negative tonight, but I actually think there's bright light here. And the reason for that is because we see all of these other big challenges, right? I mean, medical challenge, access to medical care is huge. It's becoming more and more of a problem. Housing is so expensive in this area. Transportation, childcare, all of these things we really kind of need government in there to help us fix. And historically, we have had government in there to help us fix food insecurity. But we're seeing that step away. So I think we have a choice, which is really to say, okay, we'll do the best we can with less. We can, just feel overwhelmed by it, or I think we can get creative. And I think that this is one area we not only, I think, can solve, because I do actually believe that food insecurity is solvable, but we can solve it even in this moment. But it means really changing how we think about food insecurity. It means changing how we think about our relationship to food insecurity, and all of us getting in the pool. Because government cannot fill that void. That big hole is not going to get filled, I don't think, in Trenton. It can't, it's too big. But if you look at our communities, we live in socioeconomically diverse communities. And if we can engage our communities more fully in the work of building food security, and people always feel like uncomfortable about, I just did this little food drive. We love you for that. Do that. It's all about food. So I think if we can think about all the various communities that we're part of, and we can activate them in support of food security.
But make sure everybody understands. Let's just start with the basics. You go home tonight, you write a $25, $50, $100 check. What does Tony's Kitchen get if somebody hands you $100? What difference does that make for the food insecure that you deal with on a daily basis there?
Sure. Well, just yesterday, my food manager said, so Anne, we're almost out of pasta and we need 1,500 boxes of pasta a week, right? So I know where that $100 check is going. And it doesn't have to be a financial donation. It can be food. Food is treasure for us. And activating your communities around food or around fundraising, it does make a big difference. And when you stabilize families in the food space, you give them breath to do things like pay a medical bill, repair their car, the things that they need a little bit of relief in. Food actually provides that.
But when you're talking about thinking differently, for instance, we have any gardeners in here? Right? How about an extra row in the garden?
Perfect, we love that.
And the extra food can go right to you or whoever.
Right.
But these are it's like we don't have a choice but to begin to be more thoughtful.
Yes.
Beyond just writing a check.
Yes.
It's how you approach the fact that we now have critical need in our community in this specific area.
Yes. And we would also want you to think more broadly about your impact in the groups that you're in. So whether it's a faith community like this that's very active in the food space, right? Or a book group, or a block party, or your family reunion. This is how you can raise significant food and get everyone engaged in the food conversation and begin to keep them engaged. And that is the only way we're going to get through this moment.
That's a great idea. Every time the book group meets, everybody brings a can.
Sure.
I never thought about that. Are you finding the nonprofits that are able to help in this realm? They're also probably pretty strapped. Is there, in terms of government and the direct, like the pantries, are there other parts of our communities that we need to sort of get going a little bit?
Well, sure. I mean, you have the nonprofits like Tony's Kitchen. As a matter of fact, when you talked about the garden, I thought of City Leaves, which is right on the Montclair-Clifton borderline. They have a great program where, you come there with your SNAP money, right? And they give you back double its value in fresh food. So what a great mission that is. There's a great pantry. What's the name of the pantry in Clifton, the other one? It's another faith-based.
In Clifton, St. Peter?
St. Peter's, that's the other one. That's just, and they serve a very religiously diverse community, both, Muslim and, Christians and alike, and it's just neat to watch the work that they do. So really, a lot of nonprofits and the faith-based ones are doing their best to fill the gap, but they can't do it alone. They're strapped as it is, so they really, need all of our support as well as governments combined. So we have a lot of work to do to try to fill in this gap. We're challenged in the legislature, looking at all of them. Food is just so important that maybe we'll pay a little bit more attention in that area versus maybe some of the others. It's just a lot of, Sophie's choices that we're gonna be facing. You mentioned before, a few years back, we took what they called the food stamp challenge, and you lived for a week to see if you could survive, but to see what it was like to survive on only spending what you would get in government assistance through food stamps. Wasn't easy. That's why you don't have any pasta. That was about all I ate for the week.
It really, I've heard it said, part of the challenge of our present lives is that you can't keep track of everything. If you wake up and you start scrolling, you don't want to get out of bed. And because you can't keep track of everything, somebody said, we're having trouble keeping track of anything. And so here we are, we're like, oh, food. But it's to me, as I said at the top, there's things that should be so solvable, which is why at the end of the day, this becomes a social justice issue, which is why I want to bring in Rabbi Katz right now and get some thoughts about your take on this issue that we're dealing with as a social justice issue.
So as you were talking, I was thinking about, there's a very famous quote in Judaism, Im en kemach ein Torah, which means basically, if there is no flour, Flour, there is no Torah, right? If you're looking for somebody to have a kind of spiritual experience, to study, to learn, to be engaged in Judaism, if their belly's rumbling, if they're hungry, you can't imagine that they're going to be able to do that, right? And so that's key, and that's really important. I have just a couple questions for you, real basic stuff that I think people in this room want to know, which is, our congregation has two relationships, right? It's got a relationship with Tony's Kitchen, and it's got a relationship with the Montclair, like the food pantry in Montclair, right? And sometimes people wonder, I've got $100, what is the difference between donating to a food pantry and donating to a soup kitchen? And who's helped and how are they helped and what's the impact of each? Both are important. So I'm more looking for kind of the difference between each one as people are trying to decide where their $100 goes.
Well, I would say donate it to one of them. The difference between I think you're talking about Human Needs, which is a pantry that was actually founded the same year that Tony's was founded. We were founded as a soup kitchen in 1982. We have changed quite a bit since then, and what our mission has been is to really look at where in the community is there food insecurity that's an unmet need. That's our goal. So Soup Kitchen tends to serve the unhoused. People without housing generally need a place where they can gather, they can have a hot meal, they may not have cooking facilities. And a pantry tends to serve people with housing. So this is more groceries, foods that you can prepare at home. Tony's now has a very robust choice pantry that's open 4 days a week. But our main focus is out in the community. So we do 9 what we call mobile markets. So this is really bringing pantry foods out into the community. In low-income neighborhoods, we work with several schools, other faith organizations. And then we also have 45 partner meal sites. So this is where you embed food in gatherings. So for example, a brother to brother or a social gathering of seniors. So our models are just different but complementary. And the food space just needs food. So whether you're giving it to Human Needs, St. Peter's, Trinity in West Orange, give it where it resonates for you, give it where you feel the food will be put to good use, but give it, because it's about expanding food supply.
Is there any greater recognition about what we're talking about, that we'd come out of COVID and it looked like there was some traction the state was getting? I love the position that the state government had to deal with this, and then January of 2025. Like, is there greater recognition among, in corporate America, for instance, that we need help from outside the government?
I think so. I think that there's a lot more recognition of food. And I think COVID sort of lifted the veil on how many of our neighbors were living like 2, 3, 4 paychecks away from instability. So I think it was, things became visible that had not previously been visible. And I think there is more engagement. I think there's more awareness. Do you see that in trend?
Yeah, and I mean, I think, the whole, look, we elected a governor under, a campaign that was about affordability, right? And we just think of our utility costs, insurance costs, and alike, it's, let alone people that rent, it's really all part of it. So, but again, there's nothing more basic than food.
I have a question actually about Montclair, because I know we're in Bloomfield, but the majority of our congregation is Montclair, and I imagine the majority of this room is Montclair as well. So one of the things that I learned when I first got here 8 years ago is that one of the markers of economic diversity in a town is how many kids are on free and reduced lunch. And that you actually can't just look at race, right? If you're really going to look at diversity, you have to look at who is on free and reduced lunch. And I know that over the course of the past, like 15 years, that number has actually been a precipitous decline in Montclair, which means the diversity is changing in Montclair. I'm curious, it's a twofold question, which is, number one, is that only about the change in socioeconomics, or are people at this point less likely to ask? Or maybe Tony's Kitchen is doing such a good job, or the food pantries are doing such a good job that they don't actually need the lunch because they have access to the food? And the second question that I have is, knowing that changing demographics, that means more people are coming, for example, to Tony's Kitchen from outside of Montclair, and how does that potentially change the approach?
Well, we serve Montclair, West Orange, and Bloomfield as our core service area. In other words, we won't set up programs outside of that. However, we serve the county more broadly and a little bit beyond the county. So some of the schools that we serve, certainly in West Orange and Bloomfield, are above 50% free and reduced price lunch. And these are schools that are neighborhood schools. In Montclair, because of the magnet system, you spread your free and reduced lunch out. Montclair has had a precipitous drop. I don't quote me on this, but I think the high school is somewhere around 15% right now. And that just speaks to the changing socioeconomics of Montclair. It really does. We have a growing number of recent immigrant families that are doubled, tripled, quadrupled up in certain areas of the town. And that's a focus area of ours. Seniors are a focus area of ours in Montclair. But I think the school lunch numbers are real. They're about kids who are eligible. And the one thing I would add to this, because you mentioned, like, is Tony's Kitchen doing such a good job? I think the interesting thing is that you will have these rates of free and reduced price lunch in schools, regardless of what their percentage is. And they will not change because of the work being done by the food support sector. And the reason for that is that you can build food security using these quote unquote temporary supports. So you can have children who are growing up using a pantry, using free and reduced price lunch, and be in a food secure home with everything that accrues from that. And there's a lot of research that talks about what accrues from being in a food secure home, even though you're using these supports. And I think it's just a reflection of these were originally built to be very temporary, they've become structural, and if we change how we think about them and we leverage them more fully, we can build food security using them.
I'm just wondering if there are questions from the audience. Anybody have anything that you would like to?
I'll grab them.
Okay. Well, while we wait for that, Marge?
I know that there's some states or communities that have gone with giving every kid a free lunch, and that they actually say it's a money saver because there's no administrative cost to it and no dealing with the collecting. Has there ever been any move about doing that in New Jersey?
I was just saying to Tony, I think we actually did for a couple of years, and that just around the COVID time. And then that discontinued about a year ago. So that's interesting that you say that. The other thing about this short-sightedness of the federal government cutting back on these dollars is that there's an economic benefit to doing it, because being able not to be food insecure enables you to do the kind of other economic things that otherwise are a tax on the system. So it's very interesting.
I'm going to piggyback on that for you. I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up outstate. I grew up in St. Cloud, Minnesota. There's a very large Somali resettlement population there, and it's created a lot of friction in the community. Because
We've seen that a little bit recently.
I also have I have two people. I have one person who works for Lutheran Social Services, so she's very much affected by the USAID cuts, and they provide all kinds of services. But more specifically, I had the distinct honor of moving back to Minnesota for about 6 months to take care of my father, and I enrolled my then fourth grade son in the local school, and they offered free breakfast for everyone. And the response that I got from the teachers was, it's great because kids sometimes come and they just don't have food. And I know in the community that I grew up in that there's a very diverse mix of socioeconomics. The other thing that I would like to say is that at the time, vouchers were enacted in Minnesota. Like, you could send your kid anywhere as long as you could get them there. And one of the major things that was happening at that moment when we were back is that the St. Cloud School District was basically their school lunch program was basically being defunded because all of the people that could afford to buy lunch were moving out. And those two things work in tandem with each other. When you have free and reduced lunch, the kids that pay full freight are also assisting with that. I might be mistaken on that, but there were so many people exiting the district that they had probably 60% of their kids or more who were doing that. And that's where another place where we can all come together as a community and support each other.
So do you have a response to that?
I love the idea of free lunch and free, we have free breakfast, I believe, in Montclair. I could be wrong right now, but I think it's still there.
I don't think Bloomfield does.
Okay, yeah, I mean, kids should have healthy food,
And
you
I
know?
know that Tony's Kitchen has been, in the summertime, has been making sandwiches and bringing them to the Bloomfield Library for kids that are part of their program. I think part of it is we as a community also have to figure out how we
And picking up on this, can we just circle back to one thing? We're sitting here, we're having this discussion that is weighing heavy on our hearts. And you said you still have hope, and you're still full of
Oh,
optimism.
totally.
Totally. How?
I think
Like,
this is the one like bright spot. It is like we have the capacity to feed our people. We just do.
we don't have
just
the
to
will.
get- I think we do. It's just like we have to have like a vision of how to get there. And I think the vision is us, it's our networks. It's like thinking about who do I know that's coming to visit me? Can I ask them to bring peanut butter when they come, right? Am I having a block party? Can we make it a food raiser? It seems so like pedestrian, but it's not if you all do it, right? If you activate your networks and we all do it. And I think, and then families will have the stability, it will not fix access to medical care. It will not fix housing, but it will dampen the impact.
So as we're talking about takeaways from the evening, the simplest one is an awareness takeaway. Flip that switch of awareness and incorporate in your daily lives things like, the book group's coming over tonight. Everybody bring a jar of peanut butter, which is simple. That we can get hopeful about.
So we have a question over here.
Thanks. First, thank you all for everything you do. Secondly, I love the hope, and I'm curious, stepping all the way back, how much money would it take to feed the insecure people in New Jersey a year? Like, how big a problem is it from a money perspective? And if we had that money, which we don't, if we had that money, do we have the infrastructure to feed all the people with the money? Or do we need money for infrastructure? Do we need more of what you do and what others do in the community as far as building out infrastructure to get people fed?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit before. 2 billion was the number that we saw before all these changes. So what that will now translate to, plus the extra administrative cost, we'll see as to what that.
That was $2 billion and still had 800,000 food insecure people, right?
Well, the 800,000 food insecure were being made secure vis-a-vis those
Right.
dollars.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean 100%, but the vast majority. Those are the number of individuals served, so to speak. And the infrastructure's there, thank God, because of
Right, and
organizations like this. And by the way, it's not all that 2 billion. A lot of it's private donations on top of it.
right. Yeah, there's a lot of infrastructure that was built over the last 4 or 5 years in the state, which is why it's such a tragic moment to like let that go, because we have built a lot of infrastructure. So let's use it. And if it's just going to be harder now, then it's just going to be harder. But if we engage more of the community, like you're all here tonight because you are interested in food security.
That's actually the question I wanted to ask the politician. In your view, if somebody ran a campaign in the fall on something like food insecurity, it's not, we're in this room because we care, but you have to grab people's attention, sort of folks who aren't in this room. Do you think you could run a campaign with food insecurity as one of the foundations and it would actually get any attention, or are we even past that politically?
I think we're a little past that. I don't know if the candidate that's going to say, hey, I'm going to feed the people, I mean, that's, what was the old chicken in every pot, right? So that's not that, it's not, it's right, it goes right to human existence. But at the end of the day, I don't know if it's a political issue as much as it's one of many as it relates to our social nets that are being, dismantled by the current way that the federal government is thinking. Can I mention one thing on hope?
Yeah, please.
So when you such a beautiful message of hope, I always think of the Diary of Anne Frank. And there's a piece in there where this young kid, would hear a bow break, and was that the Nazis coming to kill or take away her and her family, or Robin, right? She lived that life for those time that she was there. And then in that same diary, she said, I believe all people are inherently good. That's just a pretty amazing thought from someone in that circumstance. So there's always hope. I look at all of you, there's a lot of hope. So we're gonna make this happen.
Got a question right there?
Yeah, I have it though. I have two questions actually. One is, what about restaurants? I know that, I mean, you were talking about the fact that America has enough food, and I think we do in general. So why isn't the food given? There's a lot wasted. I know that is one of the aspects. And the second one is that I believe you also have, what is it, like a vintage store, or a store where people can buy, is that for clothes, and that money does that go to the food kitchen? Because I just read that literally in the past week or so, and I didn't know, because I have given clothes, but I never knew exactly what happens to them.
Well, we appreciate that.
So I wanted to know those two things.
Sure. So in terms of clothing, we do free clothing distributions after our meals. We are just about to launch clothing distributions at our neighborhood mobile markets. Those are free. We also put clothing in our thrift shop, which we just love. It's a very fun place. People from all over the community shop there, and I love it because it really normalizes shopping in the thrift shop. So you'll see people who are coming from the pantry with their young children, buying like a new outfit for their child for 50 cents, and there's agency in that, and there's choice, and there's all the things that go with that. And the proceeds from that help our food program. And I forgot your first question.
Restaurants?
Oh, yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated. How many of you have ever had a party and say, oh my God, what am I gonna do with all this extra food? Let me bring it to other people, right? Well, I certainly have. But it's complicated. There's, maybe you could take it to the local firehouse or something like that. But, taking it, there's foodborne illnesses, there's a whole array as it relates to getting that to, somebody that could use it that you don't necessarily know. So it's just.
It's not the most efficient way of dealing
Exactly.
with the problem is to take the restaurant.
But there are organizations that
That's
are
me.
doing that. Yeah, some really great organizations are out there working on how do you make sure the food is safe, that it's kept at a right temperature and all of that, and repurposed. There's really some great Table to Table is out there working on that. They bring food to us. We really appreciate it. So there's really good work being done in that space, but it is complicated.
We do a little bit with Panera Bread, when
Yeah.
at the end of the day we'll get, and then.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yes, I am with Table to Table, so I'm happy to continue that piece of the conversation with anybody who's interested about how we safely rescue and redirect food to places like Tony's and Human Needs and our other pantry partners. But what I wanted to ask is, I live here in Bloomfield, and obviously I work in this space as well. And it does bring me hope to see how many people have gathered here tonight. I am always really, really surprised, because I work in this space and I surround myself with people in this space. I'm always really surprised when I meet, my own neighbors or families from my son's school that still seem to have no idea that this problem exists in our community, and that they think this is something that is not here, that it's only the people who are panhandling in places like Patterson and Newark. They just can't wrap their minds around the fact that it's our neighbors. So I guess my question is sort of how do all of you suggest that we as a community sort of chip away at those conversations, especially in a time when things are very combative, right? And where people immediately kind of dig into their own perspective. And I just got in this conversation yesterday with someone in Bloomfield when I talked about rescuing surplus food from the schools, and they're like, that's ridiculous, and nobody in our community needs that. I'm like, oh God, oh boy. So any guidance you have to foster those conversations?
Any guidance about how you raise awareness?
Well, I think that's why we're here. I think we are all emissaries on this, and that we need to educate our neighbors, we need to educate our families. It's not obvious, it's not in front of us every day, and it can be disappointing that people might not see it, but they don't see it. So our job is to help them with it.
Reminds me of the mental health stigma, right? Forever, 10 years ago, no one would ever even think of admitting that. Now it's changed somewhat. How many people do you know that are food insecure that don't necessarily advertise it? So
I think it's as simple as everybody walking out of here tonight with a stat you can throw at your neighbor. 1 in 10 New Jersey households, food insecure, 1 in 10. So if they want to, you're entitled to your own opinion, you're not entitled to your own facts, all right? Yes.
So I just wanted to make a comment. First of all, thank you all. When you were talking about corporations, I think to myself, the Amazon drivers, you were talking about maybe the private ambulette drivers, home healthcare aides. So many of those positions, like Amazon, for instance, hire secondary companies. They don't even provide their employees the benefits that are needed. And when I think about when I go into the supermarket, there's people I know in that supermarket that work 3 jobs because the supermarket will not give them the 40 hours. So when I think about a campaign and I think about food and corporations, it's like there's so much more that goes into that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think if we wanted to solve food insecurity, we would not start with cutting food stamps. I think we would start with looking at what gives rise to food insecurity, and we would work on those issues. In the meantime, what we can do is build food insecurity using these imperfect structures.
All right, we have time for one more.
Hi, I'm Susan, and first of all, I wanted to say that it's me over here. I refuse to think that I don't think that there's any reason anyone should have to go hungry. I think collectively the will isn't there at the federal level, and it's really sickening to see, food and hunger being politicized at that level. I did want to say though, I wanted to ask, during COVID, I know that there were some, supply issues, food sourcing. So I wanted to know if you could share what's going on now with being able to get food. And I know Tony's Kitchen has tried to be creative in terms of finding, creative ways to source the food that you distribute. So can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. During COVID, there were supply chain issues that were very significant in the early months of COVID. We started to see that a little bit during the government shutdown, and I think we would have seen more of that had that continued. We don't see supply chain issues. I don't know if you see any across the state at all, Senator.
I think that's
Our issue is really building capacity in the network.
We're going to give the last word to our 3 panelists. We're going to go down the line here. Senator, last thoughts?
Sure. First of all, you were so humble. Susan is the Deputy Mayor, Susan Shin of Montclair. So thank you for your service. I just want to say thank you to Carrie and Beth. You introduced me to Ann, and like the rest is history. So thank you for that. Thank you all.
Ann?
Yeah, I have to say thank you to Carrie as well, and Beth. For so many things, Carrie. That's right. Carrie set up our little cookie project with Java Love, which we love. And Senator McKeon has been just a tremendous supporter of us. He's secured funding for food support multiple times and has just always turned up for anything related to food support. And I so appreciate that. And Jim, amazing friend of Tony's for many, many years. Thank you so much. Can I say one thing?
Please, your thoughts.
Amy was handing out some cards, and those cards have ideas on it on how you can activate your network. And so if you'd like to do that, let us know on your way out. We will be building out some toolkits as we go forward on our website to really support this idea of expanding our network of friends.
Rabbi Katz, final thoughts?
Yeah. So look, there's a lot of ways to get involved, and part of the beauty of the panel that we had is that, the way to attack this problem is in the micro and the macro, right? If you don't have good food policy, lots of people are going to go hungry, and you can't wait for good food policy to make sure that people get their next meal, which is why we have both of our panelists here tonight representing each of these two different ways to attack the problem. Now, each of us can be involved in our own way, and as we heard before, bring food, donate money, push your religious institutions to do more. As I was walking around, people were giving me ideas. Marge mentioned, for example, the fact that there's all this free food that's giving out at Easter time by the supermarkets. Even if you don't personally need it, take it and then bring it to a place that's going to give it out to people. Otherwise, they're just going to end up sitting on the shelves and then eventually either go bad or be sold. The cookie project, for example, when you're going to Tony's Kitchen, there's a special cookie, when you're going to Java Love, there's a special cookie just for Tony's Kitchen, where if you buy it, some of the proceeds go toward Tony's Kitchen. Pay attention to those little micro moments where you can make a difference, because when you chip away at it, it matters. For us, it's volunteers who once a month stand outside of ShopRite, give people a flyer that says, on your way out the door, buy an extra can, go to an extra box, and we end up donating it to the food pantry. And we, last weekend, we brought 2 van loads full of that food to the food pantry. So think about the ways to get involved. So thank you again to Carrie. And I do want to say also, if you like these kinds of conversations, we've got a number of them coming up. The next one, which I really want to plug, is that we're going to be having 2 nights in a row with the 2 candidates for New Jersey 11, the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate. So Joe Hathaway is going to be coming on Monday the 6th, and Analia Mejia is going to be coming on Tuesday the 7th. And so I think it would be best to hear them back to back. And so we want to invite you to both nights, but if you only want to hear one, feel free to come on one of the nights, and I'll be in conversation with them.
One more time, we just want to thank State Senator John McKeon and Myrnan. Thank you both for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
When's your daughter getting married or something? It's daughter next year sometime. Just a photo for you. Rabbi?
Okay, good.
Thank you.
One thing, we should bless your grandkids in life, because it's the one thing in life that's not overrated.
That's what I've been told.